Are we ready to start?
I think so.
We'll
Get ready.
share. Yep. We brought some pictures. This is our family. Our children are enjoying time with cousins and grandparents up in High Point, North Carolina today. So we were there Friday. Did we get there Friday? Friday through today. So we let them stay with their cousins and have some more time. We'll be going back to Albania in 2 weeks. But this is Asher. Emmett is our next one. And then Talia, and then Juniper. And their ages 11, 7, 4, and 2. And they have heard us speak so many times, so I'm kind of glad we're not having to wrangle them in right now. They might get bored. But we wanted to share a little bit with you about what we're doing in Albania and kind of where we came from. So I'm just going to share where we came from and how we got there. So we lived in Cambodia for about 8 years. We both had felt the Lord calling us to mission before we ever met each other, before we were ever married. And I went to Cambodia right after I graduated college back in 2003. 2004 is when I left for Cambodia. And I spent about a year there working with children coming out of sex trafficking situations in Cambodia. And as I was there, I felt like I needed more training. I needed to go. I knew I wanted to do counseling, but I also knew I wanted to be a missionary. And so came back to get my master's degree in clinical psychology so I could do more work with traumatized children. And that's where I met my husband. And he was studying intercultural studies to go overseas. And he had a heart for the Middle East, and I had a heart for working with vulnerable women, children in some capacity. And when God brought our hearts together, we started praying about where in the world would he lead us. So I allowed the Lord to just take my heart for Cambodia. And I just said, wherever in the world you have us to go, I give it to you. Because I felt like he wanted me just to lay it down. And I did. And as we joined the mission organization, as we prayed, the Lord ended up bringing Cambodia back around. And that's where we went and where we served. But it was in a different capacity. We were working with an unreached Muslim group in Cambodia, a very small people group. But our hearts were to see the unreached come to Christ, and that's where we felt like the Lord was leading us, and so that's where we went. After 8 years of being there and having very little tangible fruit we could see, we had not seen a church plant develop. We had not seen many people come to faith. We did have opportunities to share the gospel, but we had to have to travel into these very rural parts of Cambodia, because the majority of people group that we lived around, that's not who we were working with. So it was very difficult for our family with small children to kind of get to where these people lived. So we sensed the Lord might be leading us in a different direction. He started opening up more doors for counseling and opportunities. So we just kept praying, Lord, what do you have for us? And when our visas were expiring in 2018, we decided to come back to the States for a time of discernment and prayer. And that's where we laid down, once again, our plans and all the things we thought we knew we were doing, and just said, okay, God, is this where you're continuing to lead us, with this hopeful heart that maybe he'd take us back to Cambodia, because we really loved life there, ministry there. We had friends and family, not real family in Christ there with us. And that was our kids' home. We left with a 7-month-old, and when we came back to the U.S., he was really grieving, because that's all he knew was Cambodia. But sure enough, as we went through a discernment process, the Lord gave us different places to pray about. And we decided anywhere someone had invited us to go, anywhere a door had opened for us to potentially join somewhere in the world, we would pray about it. We would just ask the Lord. So Cambodia was on the list. But we had, 4 or 5 countries that we prayed about? And one by one, God, through a group of people that we had gathered together to discern his will together, began to just dwindle down till we had Albania left, which was only on the list because one friend said, would you consider and pray about Albania? And so we did. So I'm going to let Zach take it from here, and he's got pictures to share more about what we're doing in Albania.
It's really dangerous when you say, yes, you'll pray about something that maybe you don't want to pray about. But these dear friends of ours were in Cambodia for 5 years. And they were our first really close friends, our kids' really first close friends. And when they left, it was really difficult to see those that you love leave where you're doing life together. We've all been through that, I'm sure. On the field, it seems more accentuated because it's, you're really your family together because your family's not there. And so when Jamie and Holly asked us about praying about Albania, I thought we'd never end up there. And we said, yeah, we'll pray about it. And of course, here we are. And so it was a really cool process, that process of discernment. But one of the things it did, so we're sent out by the Anglican Church of North America as our sending church, as well as Ministry Essentials International as our sending organization. And so it really is cool how this works because MEI is all about soul care and counseling, pastoral care on the field, like life on life with people. And the ACNA is like, being ordained in this denomination. That's what we're able to do. And so the church that we've started and the people that are a part of that are often the ones that we're supporting for the work that they are called to do in cross-cultural ministry or for Albanians in ministry in Albania. So we have a ton of support back in the States of what we're doing there. Sometimes it can feel really isolating on the field and lonely, and who are we connected to? But our experience has been that through this kind of joint sending effort, we have people that are really with us. And that includes all of our individual family partners. So we feel like this is a group effort, of what we're doing in Tirana is because of all of you, it's because of all of our churches and our partners together for the gospel. So we have that support to send us out to Albania. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to show some pictures of life there and give you a visual. I have a couple of these. This is kind of my recruiting spiel. Like, how beautiful it is. Come and join us and work with us in Albania, because that is one of the realities that we'd love to see. I noticed during Holy Week, I did all the services myself, and it was just exhausting because it was spring break, and I'm trying to do all this stuff. And I recognized I would love to have somebody else out here who's able to come and serve. And we have all these kids within our community. The last 10 months, we went from 3 families. And we arrived on a Friday into Tirana. We started meeting on Sunday morning that week with the Wallens, this family that asked us to come there, another family. And when we left, we had about 60 people that were joining us with like 30 kids and 30 adults. You can imagine how chaos it was during COVID and having to quarantine half the time with different people. But the Lord was so kind to give us an opportunity to meet together. And we would meet in our house or in our yard, out kind of looking at the mountains. And it was a real neat visual of, we'd often be just speaking about, like, Jesus is our good shepherd, and then the shepherd leading her sheep would walk by down that we would see. And so real tangible ways of worshiping together. So these are just some pictures of the beauty of Albania and hopes that some people will feel drawn to come and join us. Shamelessly, right? See, like, hiking is beautiful, lots of mountains, lots of opportunities to be outdoors. We love this because in Cambodia we felt a bit stifled in the city, lack of opportunity to really get out and about. But here, there's just something about nature, the grandeur of the surroundings that draw our hearts and our souls to the Lord. And we see that within the church community. This is a view of our house, not of our house, but from our house, sunset. So come and join. Look at life in Albania, right? I'm just going to show you some pictures of how our church has kind of developed and what that looks like. These are our really good friends, Jamie and Holly, and we're in Albania. I mean, not because of them, obviously, because of the Spirit's leading, but because of them, because they asked us, pray about it. And Jamie has led with us in our church plant, and Holly as well. And it's just so fun to do life with dear friends and worship and life together. I mean, it's like, I wonder, Lord, you're so kind to allow us to serve with this family in Albania. And they have kids that are our kids' ages, and it just really is special for us. So these are some of the people that we are blessed to do life with. Our missionaries that are living in Albania kind of full-time and hope to stay in Albania and work with Albanians, or the Roma, which would be the real impoverished community. We have some that are coming to Albania to learn the language and then hope to launch out into other unreached areas like Kosovo, North Macedonia, Montenegro. There's actually more Albanians outside of Albania than inside. Part of that comes from communism. Part of that comes from this negative population growth where people are longing for work opportunities. And so there's a great Albanian diaspora in the surrounding countries. So some people that come and worship with us are like passing through. It's very transient. The mission field is super transient. Oftentimes people coming and going. Very unique in some ways. We also have some Albanians that are in full-time ministry in Albania. And so the way that we've kind of shared about who we are is it's a place to come and be together for the season that you're here. And some people come for a week or two, a month, and then they go to Albanian church because a lot of people are there to work with Albanians and want to learn the language to do maybe church planting themselves within more remote areas within Albania or the Balkans in general. So it's really like not a membership kind of sign here, you're a part. We want to be a part of this together for as we're able and whatever that looks like. So we're just trying to figure that out, honestly. And so as we've just shared that with people, I think there's been a real hunger for this authenticity, being a part of a community that's generous and loving one another and saying, I see you're serving in this capacity in Tirana. How can we come alongside and support your ministry? And as a come and be filled, and then kind of like I love what we say at the end of our service here, like go out into the world, rejoicing in the power of the Holy Spirit. That's the reality and what we want to see in Tirana with your missionaries, your Christian workers, your people that are like on the fence with faith, like come and see what God is doing and then be launched out into what he has for you. And so we need that community and that support in order to fulfill what God has called us to. And so here's kind of how we worship just sometimes. So sometimes we meet on our porch. And during COVID we had these restrictions where we can meet 10 people at a time outdoors. And so, or I guess it was indoors too we could meet, but we had to have masks and stuff. But we had to figure out how do we do this? Like we have more numbers, we have to meet 2 or 3 different times. We have to have do we involve do kids count as people or do they not? And just what's the spirit behind what the government has said? And obviously we wanted to honor the spirit of what is happening, with why restrictions are there in the first place, because a lot of Albanian churches continue to meet indoors, like full numbers, and we just didn't feel good about that. And so we didn't want to be the missionaries that come in and do whatever we want. And so we really wanted to listen to what was being done, but also realize we need community. We need to worship together. We need each other. So sometimes we meet on the porch. Other times we met in our driveway. And this is, the porch provided the shade. It's hot right now, 100 plus in Tirana. And it's cold in the wintertime. Not snow cold, but if it's cold enough to snow, then it doesn't often have the precipitation. But we need covering. We don't need covering. And so it's, what do we do? This leads me to, we're really praying about a location for where we can kind of commit to for a year or so to then see what God's going to do for a longer term place. It's been so refreshing to meet like this. And here's another picture, when it rains, here we are in the living room of our house, trying to figure out how do we do this together. The ideal place has been here. This is our yard looking at the mountains. And just the beauty that we're able to then, Albania has 300 days of sun a year. So oftentimes outside is a great option. But there's times when it's so hot or rainy, it's not. And as we grow, it's an ebb and flow. People come, people go, but we really feel like we probably need a space that we can meet in. So that's a huge prayer request as you think of it. You can pray for a space that we can use as Vine and Branches Anglican to meet in. But it wouldn't just be a place for church. It would be a place for a community center of sorts, that the church would kind of rent out this space in a community center where people can come. There's other things happening during the week. Outreaches. We'd love for it to be in a Muslim neighborhood so that we can kind of have cookouts and invite people to come and go out into the community and care for people and just share what we're doing. So the space is so important for that. And the intimacy that we've been able to establish through this, we don't want to lose that. And so what does that look like when we get more people or have a bigger space? And so there's so many things that we're navigating, the uncertainties and the unknowns, but I think the one thing, if you take one thing away from this, what we're doing in Albania, is that God has been so kind this year, that even in the middle of COVID, he's allowed us to meet and encourage one another, to spur one another on to love and good deeds. That's it. He's been kind to allow that to happen. So here's just a few more pictures of some of our worship times together. Kids are involved. That's one of the things we try to do is have kids of all ages involved in our service together. And I always ask Asher, I never tell him, I always ask him, hey, come serve the wine with me. Noel said, how do you feel about Daddy asking you all the time to do this? I love it. I just love being a part of it. And so we want our kids to know that they're a part, that the idea of Jesus welcoming the children and blessing them. We want to incorporate that into our worship together. And so, but at the same time, we are praying, we have needs, like who's going to watch the little ones like Juniper and these little kids. So how do we, navigate this with limited resources in terms of people, most people in Albania are there to serve cross-culturally themselves, and so there's this sense of, I'm doing my ministry during the week and I'm exhausted, right? And they're coming to worship with us on Sundays saying like, I need something to fill me. And so that's the bit of the tension, right, of how do you get volunteers and people to serve alongside with you in these different areas of ministry while people are just really depleted and worn out, and the Balkans is a hard place to live. So during Holy Week, I'll just show you some pictures of what we did. We had a Passover Seder. This was just a really neat experience to and also humbling for me to think, many Jews around the world celebrate this meal but have no linkage, like this points all to Jesus. And there's just so much symbolism in that. And so we got to do some special things tangibly with our faith to help grow our community. We had a foot washing on Monday, Thursday. The kids made a resurrection garden together over this past Easter time. We went down to the coast for first baptism as a church of one of these children of the missionary family that's living in Albania now. Life on the field is not always easy, right? Sometimes things happen that you don't expect. And our first week in Tirana, the kids left out a toy, and Noelle had broken her wrist about, 7 years ago? And she stepped on the toy and fell and thought she broke her wrist again. And so navigating the hospital system in a foreign country when you're a week in there is not what you sign up for and hope for. But thankfully it wasn't broken, and it's just things that happen that you never can prepare for. And we know that happens here, but sometimes it just feels more stressful there because of language barriers and where do we go, and I don't know anybody yet. But also on the field, beautiful things kind of cultivate in this soil that we really have the time and space to stop for a moment. And so this is Asher remembering his baptism. He was baptized the week before he left Cambodia. It's a super special thing for him to have that there. Other kids were baptized at our church in South Carolina. But every year we get to the kids remember their baptism. We call their godparents, and we have what's God done in your life over the last year? So we get to celebrate that and take the pause to do that. I tell people that the two people I want most in my life in Albania is a doctor and a mechanic. Well, we have a doctor friend, and Jamie's a mechanic, my really good friend. So unfortunately, there are times when Jamie's not in the country, like here. We were coming back from our retreat with our organization, and we broke down on the side of the interstate, 90, 100 mile an hour traffic, 100 plus degrees, found a little spot to pull over, and we're kind of oh crap, what do we do? What's really nice is to know people who know people, right? Who knows people here that you can call I need help. And so a friend Ano, who I'll show you a picture of him in a moment, it's all about relationship. We're just trying to live relationally with people. We called Ano and said, by this time of Lushnia, we have no idea what to do or who to call. Can you help us? He's like, of course, bro. I've got a tow truck coming in 10 minutes. And so this is us riding back from Lushnia, 2 hours to Tirana, in a 2-seater tow truck, all 6 of us and the driver, no air conditioning. And the kids are like, this is an adventure. So a mechanic and a doctor, that's really who we need, right? Thankfully we got our car fixed and it's no problem. But this is Ano and his family. And it's just been, one of the prayer requests I had was, Lord, I want to have 1 or 2 Albanians that I can lean on, and they can lean on me. They can just be this, I really am learning from you about culture and just life together. Ano and his wife Claudia are one of those families. She's not a believer yet. He's had some real struggle within the organized church in Albania. I think his parents are Orthodox and some other things, but he's really growing in his faith right now. And part of that is just by being life on life together. In Albania, there's a real sense of aggression. Men are aggressive, and it's kind of a violent culture. And if you wrong somebody's family member, then they take revenge on you, and just that whole thing. So one of the things we're trying to do within our church community and just life is planting seeds of a different way, forgiveness and grace, and stepping away from revenge and into that. So Ano's been a recipient of that, and it's just really blossomed as this, he's a tough guy. And most Albanians look like this guy. And to penetrate their heart is harder to do that. But there's what's the saying? To get into the flesh of the fruit, right? It takes some time, but then you're in there, and it's so ripe. And that's how he is and his family. And they have been such a blessing to us to take care of registrations, residency permits, all the stuff they help us with. So to have people like this, life on life together, we're all gaining the joy and the beauty of that, right? I'll just a few more pictures and you can ask some questions, but this is our Ministry Essentials team. So we are only one other couple's in Albania with us. The rest are in Hungary or the US, but we're all doing this ministry of like life on life soul care and counseling, pastoral ministry, kind of how's your heart type questions. And we've seen in Cambodia when we were there that really launched us into this area to care for people is that missionaries need the gospel, just like all of us need the gospel. We wrestle with things, we are challenged by life. And to have somebody come alongside of you who's maybe walk with you through a battle of cancer that you're walking through means a whole lot than trying to have a phone call with somebody in a different country or just, it's hard to do that long distance. So our real heart is to see like life live together. So this is the team that encourages us, and we get together once a year to do that. A couple other ministry outlets, and this is where we also are asking people to come and help because there's so many opportunities in Albania. Can't show a lot of the counseling ministry that we do because it's obviously with the confidentiality, but we meet with families in our home or in their home and life together. But this is something that I've tried to do is get some guys together to go hiking. And we've noticed with men particularly that like walking towards a mountain peak side by side together, that brings out conversation that doesn't happen over a coffee. And so that's one of the areas that I've seen like Albanians don't cry, but when they do, it's just sacred ground to be together, to hear their hearts, to hear the brokenness of what they've gone through. And oftentimes this is just a pathway to do that, is to go hiking. And so thankfully there's a lot of opportunity, rich for outdoorsy stuff that guys can have shared experiences to do together. So this is just a couple pictures of that. And when you're hiking in Albania, you run across people that welcome you into their home. It's incredibly hospitable culture. There's no sense of privatization of land, trespassing, that kind of thing. You know, I often laugh at people, if you go into somebody's property here hiking, you might get shot or something else. But there, you'll get welcomed in to have some raki together, which is their grape liquor that they make, or coffee, huge coffee culture. But you never know who you're gonna meet. That's part of this, like, real beauty of life there, is you go off thinking you're just gonna go hike together for a couple hours or by yourself, and then you get welcomed into these people's home, and you get to hear some stories. And so often there's not a lot of English in these villages. If you're with people that do speak Albanian, I haven't learned yet, that's even better. But how much it fills our heart with joy and gratitude to have people say, come over with me and come into my home and have a coffee with me. It's just so fun to be able to do that. It's rarer here to do that. We try to keep our kids involved in our ministry too, and just life together. And so one of the areas we're trying to do is weekly take them out to do something fun as a family. We don't want them to think that this is just mom and dad's ministry in Albania and they have to be there. And to a certain extent, they do have to be there, right? There's not the same calling on them particularly like it is for Noel and I. Obviously they're called generally as our family, but we want to be sensitive that they are not missionaries. And they are not just to be paraded as such, but they are to be fostered in their growth with Jesus. And I hope that through life overseas, they have a real heart for the nations. And so, how to balance that can be tricky. So we just really want them to enjoy being here with us in life together. And so we try to involve them in things that we're doing. This is a kingdom business that Jamie started with Ano, Litany Motors, a mechanic shop to train Albanians. And so it's such a difficult place to be for young men. Jobs are scarce. Hope is very, very difficult to hold on to, especially for unbelievers. But everybody tries to find something else that's going to be the silver bullet to help their life situation. So Jamie's hope is to employ men to have a tangible skill that they can use to work in. And so one of the things that we're doing with some guys is meeting in his shop once a week. This would be for Albanian guys that are kind of like on the fence with faith, having some questions about life. So we have church, primarily to equip the body, believers for the work God's called us to do. This would be kind of a next step out. And to people that have heard the gospel, those that are like wrestling with faith, those have questions. And so we meet once a week and read a psalm together or pray together or have pizza together. It's just life on life kind of further into where they would feel comfortable, where they would feel understood. And so some of these guys are actually coming to worship with us at church as well. But it's been a really fun time to get to know. These are two of my closest friends there, Benny and Ano. And just to hear their stories, hear what God's doing in their life, come alongside and share life together. And then thirdly, there's kind of outreaches into unreached areas, right? And you saw our family, 4 young kids. We don't have all this capacity. So our street really is where we're able to kind of outreach into the community most. And this is right up the street. It's a pizza shop up top and like a smoke pit down below. It's not a smoke, it's a billiard hall, but it's like covered in everybody's smoking and drinking. I mean, but I love being there. So I really feel like that's where God has led us to be, right? To go out into the world, into the lives of people. And so it's tricky with COVID to navigate how much do you do this stuff. And so we're really trying to rely on the Spirit, but this is something that we really I want to get more into. So this couple on the right, they own this place. They're engaged, I think getting married this month. The guy between Jamie and I, just a really interesting man. And so they all speak some English, and so it's just a time to like learn from them. Like, what values do you have? Like, what do you feel excited about? What do you feel hopeless for? We're getting into some of these deeper conversations, and ultimately, it'd be great to talk about spiritual things, right? I'd love to see a church started here, in their pizza shop, billiard room area. And so there's kind of these different fold ministry outlets into the world. But we need more people to come and help, serve in some of these capacities, in hiking and in mechanic ministry and in the bar ministry that we're trying to do. And this is just I saw our family leaving before we came back to the States. There's a lot that I feel like God's done in this last year. And we're expectant for what this next year looks like. But we're also trying to hold things like this because I know that just because last year was so rich and so powerful, it's not going to look the same, most likely. I know we can all attest to that. So another way you can pray is that we would continue to go in with open hands and say, Lord, what do you want to do this year and next year? How do you want to advance your kingdom here? How do you want to transform our hearts here? What do you want to do to build your church? And so that posture, and the minute it becomes like this, we've moved away from, God's heart to be totally relinquished and in our control to Him. I'd love for you guys to ask any questions or any thoughts or anything you want to know. We can try to answer.
I have a question. What do you do for your children's education?
Yeah. So I prayed a lot about it. We were intending to be there in March of 2020, and obviously everybody's flights got canceled, and we were here, and our kids were suddenly at home. But we had intended to put them in the international school before COVID. That was what we thought we were doing. So that was the plan. But then as I prayed about it, and we knew we would still go, we just didn't know when. We ended up leaving August of 2020. I felt like the Lord gave me a real peace to start the transition time in homeschooling. We had done that when we came back to the U.S. with the kids from Cambodia. We just kind of transitioned. I did a semester of homeschooling, then I put them in school. And that was okay. But this time I had my good friend Holly that we've been talking about is a school teacher at the international school, and she had opted to pull out and homeschool her boys. So we did it together. I ordered all their curriculum and brought it over with me, and we homeschooled the boys together. And that was good for this year. I felt like getting used to a new place, it would be too complicated with math, different languages. So this was a good intro into the country, but they're ready now to start international school, and it will be full masks at school there. They keep windows opened during this time. They don't have as many people getting vaccinated there as here, but so all buildings have your windows open, and it worked out really well. I got to watch kind of how they did it in the international school last year. Cases were very low in the school anyway. But yeah, that's what we're doing right now is that's the plan, is to put them back in school. And then our 4-year-old will start preschool at an international preschool, so it'll be English speaking as well. So that's...
And these are both Christian schools, yeah, which is rare right now to have that overseas. But
we considered, local school. We did that in Cambodia as well. What do we do about local school? But when they're going off, they want to go to college, they'll need to be able to be fluent educationally in English, so it just feels like that's probably the route we need to go at this point. Even though if they were all little, it would be tempting to at least start them in like a, preschool, Albanian speaking only, so they could really get the language down. But as, our boys are so much older, I think that would be really traumatic to throw them into school before they know language. They are studying language though, our 2 boys are, and they love it. So I'm hoping as they make friends, they'll grow in the language as well.
What country is the international school in?
It's in Albania. It's just 20, 30 minutes from our house.
They'll be at home with us, and then we can drive them to school.
they set it up as a kind of hub to keep families within the Balkans to be able to stay there. 'Cause that is the big question for anybody who serves overseas with kids, is what do you do with your kids' education? So we're thankful that that's one of the reasons we're even praying about these different places where there's a school option for kids.
What about safety for you, for your family, especially for your children? How safe a place is it? What size of town is it? Do you have much crime? That kind of thing.
Yeah. So Tirana's like 750,000 people about. We live about 15, 20 minutes outside of the city, in kind of the base of those mountains that you saw. And that community feels really safe there. Obviously, like the worst, there's several different struggles Albania has. Drugs is a big one, trafficking, the mafia is bad there. Traffic and people driving, it's really bad traffic. So that's probably the biggest issue that we face, is keeping the kids when we're walking places and that kind of thing, is to not get run over by cars that are flying through. Traffic accidents cause a lot of fatalities there. So thankfully, we have vehicles that we get around in, but in our area, it feels a lot more removed from the middle of the city. And they love Americans, so just in terms of us as Americans and doing ministry there, they love Americans. George W. Bush was the first U.S. sitting president to ever visit, and that gave every American a lot of credibility in the country, so we kind of thank W for that. They named some coffee shops after him, so, and Albanians want to get to the States. And they want to get to Western Europe too, but if they could it's like the holy grail for Albanians. And not every country is like that, obviously, but there is a sense of, maybe you can help me one day get to America. That's in the back of everybody's mind. So I think in that regard, we have a lot of people interested in us and wanting to get to know us. And the country itself prides itself on being tolerant. And so you're doing an Anglican church thing, that's great, go for it. Just stay in your lane and don't try to get us primarily as Muslims or others into what you're doing. So that's kind of the reality. Tolerance is the name of the game, and as long as that doesn't infringe on other people, then you're okay. So what that would look like if things grow more within the church or the Christian community there remains to be seen. But yeah, I don't know, anything else about kid safety that you would feel like is?
Bullying is a huge issue because of the macho culture. So that is another reason we chose not to do the local school, because we were told that sometimes missionary kids can come back really traumatized from bullying, or they themselves become bullies. So we're just trying to teach them how to interact in the culture, but be Christ cultured. So, and I wanted to add, our landlords are Muslim, and they know we have a church at our home, and they're very happy with us doing that. They've said nothing but blessings toward us. So we're just praying, obviously, that God will, they seem like people of peace, that God will give us opportunity to continue to share the gospel with them as we grow in the language as well. But yeah, we don't feel unsafe personally, but we know domestic violence is a high rate of domestic violence there. A lot of drug trafficking and mafia stuff that happens, but it's more within the culture. So we as outsiders aren't as affected.
Yeah, there is a sense of, because we're American foreigners, we're outside of some of the structures that they know and understand.
Yeah.
So
they treat us with great hospitality, honestly. It's we'll protect you because you're here as a visitor in our country. And so we've seen that, just people be super hospitable to us.
You said a little bit about,
go ahead. I'll give you a hand in a second. Mike, go.
Well, you said, you mentioned a couple times that desire to have people come to help.
Yeah.
Say a little bit more about that. Do you envision kind of the gathering church sending a group that would come for a week or something, or 2 weeks, or you envision just recruiting people to move to Albania? What sort of things?
Yes.
Yeah.
It'd be great for, one of the things with partner churches is when people come for short-term time, even just to come and step foot on the ground, there's a real shot in the arm for us and for anybody that comes, right? And so there's ways that you could serve, within our church community, like some of the outreaches we're doing. There's several, even just meeting up with other people that are doing different ministries and kind of seeing what it's like. So yeah, short term would be great. Long term would be great too. I recognize that's a lot more difficult to do, to move a family overseas. But we want to be in a position where we can host, even if it is like a month or two of somebody wanting to come out and stay with us and kind of see what it's like. If it's a team of people, there's friends or there's other places that we could arrange to stay. And then of course, long term is just always, some of these dreams that we have of wanting to see some certain ministry started or maintained or partner, even like somebody else who's ordained or pursuing ordination would be super helpful, because right now the church is meeting, but they're doing small groups and they're reading the word together, but they're not doing Lord's Supper and others. So that would be great if when I leave, we could continue on as we're going. And just in the Holy Week reminder of, man, somebody else leading the service or two would be awesome. So it'd be great to see anybody here who want to come, just for even a visit, just to come and see what God's doing in Albania, because I think it'll help open your hearts and your minds to the nations and what God's doing in a different place. Both of us went long term because we went short term somewhere first, and that process was, we were cared for in that process of short term that then led us to being able to step into long term.
And we've seen that in the past, people from churches coming out and joining us for a short time and then committing to staying for a long time. Or like one girl was with us in Cambodia for 2 years, and now she's serving in Tunisia. So it's like God just moved her wherever He would have her through that short-term experience.
Anna, do you have a question?
So I noticed you had a couple opportunities of ministries to men. How are you reaching the women of Albania?
Yeah, I want to do more of that. That's another reason for more people to come, because I am a clinical counselor and my background is trauma counseling, and I get calls all the time, but my capacity is low because I have little children, because I was homeschooling last year. And my language, I don't have as much time to invest in it as I did even in Cambodia with just one child. I could kind of do more full-time language study, whereas now it's like when the kids are in school or when I have a couple hours here and there where someone's watching Juniper, I can study the language. But I see so much need, and I do get a lot of calls. I could fill my schedule with counseling for women, not just missionary women, but local women as well. And then there's a counselor that's reached out to me because she just needs help with her cases. She's like, I'd just love to process some things that other people are going through, and how do I move forward with them? So I can see opportunity for that as well. And then eventually, God still has human trafficking on my heart, and so I'm just praying into that. When and with who, I just feel like that needs to be a team effort as well, to see what the Lord would want to do to bring in people to end human trafficking in Albania. We saw lots. I saw from the time I first went to Cambodia to when I left Cambodia, I saw a huge improvement in how things were handled and how people were cared for. And now I feel like trafficking has gone more underground in Cambodia than when I was there, and you could see things happening in the open. I'd love for that to happen in Albania as well. But that's not such a, it's just a poor nation in Europe, and so there needs to be some more people coming in to work and do work there. And there's probably lots of other areas too that I'm not even thinking about where it would be helpful. I know for the third culture kids at the school, we've seen lots of kids that are just struggling, having different anxiety, different struggles, and there's no school counselor. So there's just, these would be other working with kids in the third culture area also.
There's most Albanian women have been abused domestically with their husbands, and they feel like they're the ones that they're to blame for it. It's kind of embedded into the culture there that men can do whatever they want. And so, that's a really sickening reality for people that are abused physically, sexually, and they think they're at fault, right? And so, I don't even know who all is working in this area, but if anybody, but that's a huge need. People that are trained, that can come alongside, they're sensitive, to the needs of what women go through. And so, to see women empowered and cared for and protected is a huge need there.
There's also a family in our church that's working with the Roma population, which are the poorest of the poor in Albania. They're often on the streets begging, and their organization is doing some work there. So I've even had opportunity, if I wanted to come help at their preschool that they started, just to get the kids off the street. So there's endless things that can be done, but it's just having the people to come and join and do the work.
Any other questions? Well, why don't we take some time just to pray over Zach and Noel, and just invite you if you want to come around. If it's all right, if we could do like a COVID friendly